Okay, hello guys. Welcome to the Global Medical Education CPD webinar series. If this is your first time at these webinars, my name is Dr. Naseem Naqvi. I'm the chair of these sessions, and I have with me Dr. Mansoor Ali, who is a consultant nephrologist. I am myself a consultant stroke physician working in NHS. Both of us are full-time educators. Dr. Ali has been involved in both foundation program teaching and also training program director for renal medicine roles in his region. I'm also involved myself with the FRCP PACES coaching and training sessions for more than 10 years. So these webinars we have been doing for over 3 years now, wide-ranging topics, non-clinical as well as clinical, and we have speakers from around the globe, speakers as well as attendees. All sessions are recorded. We have a YouTube channel where you can watch these sessions, and we when we started, we had not very good attendance, but it picked up. This webinar had almost 500 registrations, and they are extremely popular now because I think because of COVID as well. People find it more convenient to join from their home. They get a CPD certificate of attendance and really good quality CPD. We'll share the certificate link with you in the chat box. If you click on the link and then in the top left corner, hit the download button. You don't need to have a Dropbox account or anything, and you can download the certificate on your phone or on your laptop devices. So the format of the session, so this is the link, but we will share in the chat box as well. So the format of the session is that we have 2 speakers, 20 minutes each, and we'll take questions in the end. So if you have any questions, please do not hesitate to drop your questions in the chat box, and we will take questions in the end. So with that, I would like to introduce our first speaker, Dr. Joydeep Grover, who is medical director of Medical Defense Shield. I've known Joydeep for more than 15 years now, isn't it, Joydeep? 2006, 2007, I think we first met, and very, very nice guy, extremely intelligent, and has helped many, many doctors over the years, IMGs and as well as abroad. And he's spearheading this organization, which is called Medical Defense Shield, quite unique in a sense that it provides both employment-related cover as well as the medical defense-related cover under one umbrella. So I will hand over to Joydeep to enlighten us and our attendees on the topic of handling complaints, how to handle complaints, the do's and don'ts. So over to you, Joydeep. Thank you.
Naseem, thank you so much for that lovely introduction. Thank you for inviting me. And I'm very, very impressed by what you've achieved in, widening the scope of discussion and education over the last many years. You are a very you are a unique person yourself. Well, MTS is quite unique, but Naseem is very unique. He is very driven, very, very competent, and manages to do things which are amazing. So without much ado, let me start sharing my screen. I've just noticed that the clock behind my back has no batteries. I just noticed that while I was looking at it in my video. Okay, good. Right, so here we are. Thank you, Naseem. So it should not take more than 20 minutes. It probably take lesser time. And the reason is that I try to have less slides and more discussion. So the slides are probably just to make you think and talk about some principles, because I think that's what's really important, is you understand what are the scope. And this is basically meant with UK practice, but certainly a lot of the subjects we talk about are quite generic across the world. But the idea is that to raise awareness of how significant complaints are, what are the principles of main types of complaints, and again, principles on how you handle them and what are the usual pitfalls. So, 10 or 15 slides, not too much. We'll talk about them a little bit, but if there's some time spare from my presentation, I would rather take individual questions and clarifications, because I find they are much more illuminating to everyone who's hearing. Okay, so handling complaints. Let me see. Okay, so what's the extent of the complaints that we have? So this is within the NHS. Now, some key facts there, and I don't want to blurb them out. Last couple of years, there's not been much data collected because of COVID. But within the NHS, all of England mainly, not Scotland, but you can extrapolate some data. 570 complaints per day. So quite a lot. And the hospital and primary care complaints, similar in number and going up. We'll see the trend there. So the idea is that it is a problem. People complain a lot, and there is a lot of complaints to be handled. So the trend, and this is quite telling actually. So in 2007, when I met Naseem, hospital rate 170, primary care rate 86. But you see what's happened. Primary care rates more than doubled. And the reason is the reform of the primary care setup in England, where GPs don't do out of hours. Oh, well, actually, they're not like on call 24/7. Patients are much less happier. The hospital rates have gone up as well. And I suspect, and I can tell you for sure, actually, when the new data comes in for 21-22, the rates will be much higher than these because COVID hasn't made people happy. So that's the summary there. Complaint rates going up significantly, primary care really going up a lot. So what do patients complain about? And there's a pie diagram there, and you can see communications at the top of it. So people are generally, or patients are generally unhappy, mainly about not about whether you made the right diagnosis or not. Most of the complaints come about the doctor was rude to me, the nurse was rude, I couldn't speak to them, they didn't listen to me, they were dismissive. That's the values and behaviors part of it. And the clinical parts are actually, patient care, including nutrition and hydration. I didn't get my food on time, no one asked me for water, I wasn't happy with the diagnosis. Much lesser. A lot of complaints are quite managerial, administrative in nature. My appointment was cancelled, my operation was delayed. That's going to go up big time. Admission, discharge, transfers, again, administrative part of it. Transport, again, there. Access to treatment and drugs, quite less. Non-clinical subjects, huge amounts. So, thing is, if you just look at the treatment part of it, very similar. 1 in 3 complaints were just about the treatment part, hospital and GP equally. Communication, again, more communication problems in hospital than with GPs. So GPs tend to communicate better. And that is something which hospital doctors can learn. Attitudes and values, again, very similar. So if you split them across, patients are more likely to be unhappy with the GP for the treatment part of it, but less happier with the hospital for the communication part of it. The numbers don't look distinctly different, but I think the difference is between 20 to 50%. So some lessons and differences between primary and secondary care, but most importantly, I think, is the subject matter of the complaint. So mainly communication, less to do with everything else. And you will see why that's important. So within the good medical practice, what is your obligation? And GMC 61 paragraph is you must respond promptly, fully, and honestly to complaints and apologize when appropriate. This, I think, is key, is that when you get a complaint, just respond quickly, respond fully, be honest, and apologize if there's an apology required. And That is the key to it, really. If you follow this principle, generally, things will be okay. We should not try to make it an ego problem most of the time. But hey ho, there we go. So what can you take to handle complaints? You should inform. So if you hear a complaint, when you become aware of a complaint which has come to you, you should inform your line manager or a supervisor in case you're a trainee, can inform your office manager or pals. Now, there are different ways of receiving complaints. So hospitals, it will be very usual for the patient to complain to the patient advice and liaison service. So the complaint will not come to you directly, but may go to pals. It may go to your manager and then come to you. But in case you get a complaint where you're working in a situation and it's come directly to you, you must make sure that the relevant people who deal with the complaints, log them in, are informed about it. You should acknowledge. So firstly, just respond to the complaint. I have received your complaint. I'm sorry that you've had a reason to complain about whatever you've complained about. We will try to answer your complaint within X period of time. In case you need to have further information, this is what you can do. You can call us on this number. You can write on this email. You can email to this thing. So at least the person knows that the complaint has been received, has been logged, and they expect an answer within 2 weeks, 4 weeks, 6 weeks, whatever your timelines are. And then the next important thing is discuss it. And I would suggest discuss with the defense organization. Now, many doctors or nurses or whatever, they will discuss the complaint with their colleagues, which is okay. They will discuss complaints with their supervisors, which must be done, but or they will discuss it with the complaints manager, and that's all right as well. But the important thing is that the team which is paid to do this for you is your defense organization, and they have much more experience in handling these complaints than any of the people that you've spoken to. And they will give you the right information which will comply with the GMC guidelines, which then means that the complaints have a much higher possibility of getting resolved very quickly. As a trainee, of course, you have to discuss with the trainer and learn from it, but that does not mean that you don't tell your defense organization, because they are your friends. Top tip, talk to a buddy. Speak to someone. And the reason I say so is speak to someone sensible, because when you get a complaint, there's a lot of defense. So I've got a complaint. Why has the patient complained against me? The patient is wrong. Or, oh, wow, I've made a mistake now. My life is ruined. And I'm never going to be a doctor again. And you go to depression. I've done something wrong. You lose confidence. And that happens because you've got a very strong emotional response whenever anyone criticizes you. So it's really important to go and speak to someone who can sort of put it in context for you. There is not a single doctor that I know of who's never had a complaint against them. If you work, someone will complain against you. The only people who don't ever get complaints is the people who've never seen a patient. So getting a complaint is not the end of the world, but it can really upset you, and that can make you make funny decisions. So it's important that you speak to someone who can then put everything in context for you. Now, what do you need to be aware of? So if anyone wants to read the NHS England complaints policy, it's about 500 pages long, but your defense organization should know about that. But do understand what your local trust or practice policy is. Because that will set you the timelines, how you need to respond, who needs to be copied, who needs to sign the complaints up, etc. And that's CCG or local trust. Understand the timelines. Make sure that the patient confidentiality is always maintained. If there are immediate safety concerns, if a patient's complained to you about an issue which you think, right, that could be happening to other people, or the complaint is related to a safety concern which needs to be acted upon, then take some action then and there. Don't let it wait for 6 weeks because someone else might get harmed in that time. What are the main principles of handling complaints? And again, going back to what the GMC told us, be open and honest. Listen carefully. It's very important to do that. It's not someone has complained. listen to why they're complaining. And as I said, most of the complaints are not about diagnosis or treatment. Most of the complaints are about communication. I didn't understand it. The doctor was rude to me. It felt like the doctor did not have time to talk to me about this stuff. Listen to the patient. Listening is very, very important. Always acknowledge, yes, you've had a reason to complain. It may be, and it many times is, that there is no reason to complain as such. And you think, why is this person complaining? And I can tell you one example. Someone actually lodged a complaint about, there was a bee in your waiting room. I'm not kidding you. Someone actually complained about there being a bee in the waiting room. Someone has complained about there was a cat who walked through the waiting room. People will complain about, my food was not hot, and I didn't get the soup that I wanted to drink. And they appear very trivial, and when some of them are trivial and not quite worth responding to. But the thing is that someone has gone to the effort of actually writing a complaint, sending it to you, acknowledge it. Sorry that you had a reason to complain. You never know, they might have a bee phobia, possibly, or a bee in the bonnet about something. But always think from the patient's perspective. Why has the patient complained? Why was it so important for them to actually lodge a complaint, to take the time, go back, write about it, send it to you, and do that? How many times do people do that? It's important. Now, how do you actually answer a complaint? So before you answer a complaint, and that's why it's very important that someone else is helping you with this who can take a little bit of a perspective. Make sure that all the medical records are checked. If there is anything there which helps you say that, okay, actually you're right, you had to wait 6 hours and then your appointment got missed and something happened there, and therefore we tried to call you, but you didn't get a letter, so you didn't come on time and you missed your treatment. Just try to get everything sorted. And timelines, when did what happen? When did a particular treatment happen? When did a particular treatment was requested? When was the treatment actually happened? What actually went on? The timeline is really important. And some of the complex complaints can take hours and hours to check timelines, because you have to be sure, resuscitations, for example, or complex cancer diagnoses which were missed, and people are complaining, why did you not pick up my cancer correctly? Or if there's you should have treated me 2 years ago and now I've got a problem here. Some of these timelines can go into years, and you have to be meticulous about it. Otherwise, you can't really address the complaint properly. And it's also important because some complaints do lead to malpractice claims. So timelines are really important. If it is required and it's not a complaint only about one particular person, but actually about a whole episode of care which involves multiple doctors, multiple nurses, multiple attendances, try to get written statements so that you can see and create a proper timeline as to what happened at what time. If it is important and if you think it is really required, you need to talk to people and find out what happened. What did the patient say? What did you say to them? Your notes say this, but the patient says this is what happened. What was the truth behind it? So it's almost like being a detective. Sometimes you have to go with your lens and try to figure out what actually happened. Then obviously it goes without saying you have to address all the concerns. So, this happened, this did not happen, I'm worried about this. You have to offer explanations for each and every bit of the complaint that's raised. So many times we can become, the patients raise 3 complaints and we get a response saying, oh, yeah, this is fine. But actually the patients asked 3 questions and you only answered 1, which you thought was important. But try to address all the concerns that have been raised. And this is key, actually. Because of the emotional overload that complaints usually bring, people can become impolite, they can become rude, and it's really important that you remain professional and polite at all times. Because if the patient didn't actually have a reason to complain to start with, if you start becoming impolite and rude, then they will certainly have a good reason to complain. And that's never a good thing. So, prevention is the best cure. How do you learn from complaints? So if you've had a complaint, what's the best thing to do to not get one in the future? Because if you don't have a complaint, that's great, isn't it? So key point 1 is managing expectations. At all points of time, check what the patient wants. if they come to you in a clinic, if you're seeing them as an outpatient, if they're in your ward, if they come to the emergency department, if you're seeing them in your GP surgery, if you're doing a procedure on them, always check, what do you want us to achieve for you? And they might come up with like, I want this and this and this and that and the other. But you can then say, listen, your expectation is this. This is what we can deliver for you. These are the chances that it will be successful. These are the chances it will be unsuccessful. Are you happy with that? Shall we proceed? Almost all complaints are about managing expectations. If you know that the patient wants this and you're not able to deliver even half of that, even if that's the best that you can deliver, the patient expects you to give 100, but you can only give 50, they're never going to be happy. It's very, very important to manage expectations. Key point. Second point is to manage expectations. Third point is to manage expectations. Really, I can't emphasize it more. It is a transaction. It is a business sort of a transaction between you and the patient. Always, always make sure that the patient understands what you can do. Never overpromise. And if you can't deliver what the patient expects out of you, don't do that. Otherwise, there will be dissatisfaction, which is the main problem for complaints. Yes, sometimes you are unable to work to the standards you expect. Sometimes things go wrong. That can all happen. But managing expectations is the absolute key to preventing complaints. So spend time with the patient before you do anything, before your consultation, after your consultation. Once you finish your consultation, have I answered all your concerns? Is there anything else we can do for you? Have your questions been answered? Fine. Great. Document it after that. So some complaints go to the GMC. A lot of them. As you can see, there are huge numbers. Nearly 9,000 complaints a year to the GMC. Many of them don't progress, but around 1/3 do progress. And the ones which do progress, and I've got a full presentation on GMC, which I don't think we will go through here. GMC procedures can be complex, very long, and very stressful. These are processes which can take minimum of months, sometimes a couple of years. And during that process, there could be restrictions on how you can practice. There could be temporary suspension of your practice. But what is certain is that you will be very, very stressed. And it is a very complex procedure. Do not wade through GMC procedures by yourself. Always involve your defense organization because they're very legal and they're very complex.
Joydeep, 1 minute.
No worries, we are on time. So finally, it's mostly about expectations and values. Communication is key. You are likely to have a strong emotional response. Have a buddy, speak to your defense organization. Really important. These are the key points that you need to have. And I'm hoping that if there are more questions which come in our discussion, then we can illustrate some of these to help you. Okay, and that's, thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Joydeep. Excellent presentation. Yeah, I think the point Joydeep made about being rude gets you more complaint than any other thing. Some doctors are really quite rude, and they say, but we are right and we make the right diagnosis. So I think if you are rude and patients are making complaint, then you need to do something about it, even if you are making the right diagnosis and providing the right treatment, because you are going to get lots of complaints. We have some really great questions, but we will take questions in the end. So I would.
Naseem, can I just mention something? Naseem, can I just mention? Thanks, Joydeep. We've got some questions in the Q&A box. So we'd like to have a look at them and then we can actually answer at the end after Dr. Burney's presentation. Thank you.
Thank you. So with that, I would like to introduce our next speaker, Dr. Amir Burney, who is the founding president and the immediate past president of the Association of Pakistani Physicians of Northern Europe, also called APPNE. Very nice chap, and with loads of experience both in terms of teaching, clinical work, and has helped many doctors through his association. And so I've asked him to give us a brief talk on what are the top things that doctors, especially the international medical graduates, how to avoid common mistakes, what are the top 10 reasons they run into difficulties, and especially in the first couple of years, how to avoid the most common mistakes. So over to Dr. Burney. Thank you.
Thank you. Good evening. Hello to everybody listening in. And once again, thank you to Naseem and Mansoor for the opportunity to come and talk to everybody and the invitation. We just had a lovely presentation from Dr. Grover, and I'm hoping that my conversation will also tie into what salient features Dr. Grover actually elaborated in his talk. So there's a definite link. So I will share my presentation with you, Mansoor, and then see if everything is fine. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes.
When we can, yeah.
Okay. So as I said, thank you very much for giving me the opportunity to talk, and really some really topical topics, as I say. But having said that, they're also quite difficult ones when you start to sit down and think about those things. Because when I first started, it's a generation thing. I started much earlier than many of you. My difficulties at the time would have been different to what might be in 2021. And also surviving. What happened in my first job? How did I get through it? Again, really good topic. So I hope that this presentation is found useful across the board, really. So a bit about myself. So my name is Amir Burney. I'm a graduate of Dow Medical University of Health Sciences, now known as the DUHS, but was known as Dow Medical College, and this is in Pakistan, Karachi. I proceeded to do orthopedic surgical training, became an orthopedic surgeon in Pakistan, and then I came back to the UK many years ago. I had an interest in sports and exercise medicine, and then obviously medical education. So I now work as a full-time academic for the University of Sheffield Medical School as their co-director of studies and also their academic lead for clinical skills. I do supervise the academic foundation doctors undertaking the medical education rotation in South Yorkshire. And as Professor Naqvi has already said, I am the immediate past president and founding president of this organization, which has been trying to help IMGs from not just from Pakistan, from across the world, really, or those coming into the United Kingdom. So when I was given this topic by Mansoor some weeks ago, and then Naseem wrote to me and said, this is what we are thinking of, I started thinking, all right, how do I prepare for it? And what prep shall I do so that this talk is now worth its while for everybody listening? And so why do international doctors run into difficulties while working in the NHS? So I think everything starts with preparation, and I will talk about preparation also later when you prepare for your first job. So I thought, let's bring my own observations and experiences, bring my own perceptions of what difficulties I face or why people run into difficulties, but also to take other friends and colleagues into the mix and ask their views. So we did a quick Google form survey, and one of my friends, Dr. Mohsen Zaman, very kindly, we were just talking, and I said, I'm doing this presentation, and I want to take some more views from other people who have been working in the United Kingdom for many, many years now, and also some junior doctors who have just started maybe 6 months ago or a year ago. And let's find out what they think, what reasons they might have. Let's put them together and present this today at the presentation. So we did a Google's form survey, and thank you to everybody who took part in it. And really, I aimed it for a mix of senior and junior medics across the country working in the NHS. And we got some results back, which is fantastic. So one of the responses we were looking for is to find out who's doing what and where. So as you can see, we aimed it at junior doctors, specialty registrars, and then also at consultants and GPs and locum doctors. So quite happy to see that there was a nice mix of people coming from various levels or stratas of seniority of being junior doctors and responding to the survey. So what did we find? Now, this is a snapshot view. It happened very quickly over the last few days, actually, and it's based on personal experiences mostly, but some really hard-hitting, interesting, and valuable comments were received by us. And I was both pleasantly surprised because some of them really connected with me. but then some were quite newish, or they were very much as of 21st century happening this year. So we had 55 responders and 258 comments as far as the difficulties people see when they are working in the NHS, and what difficulties they run into while working in the NHS. So no surprises there. I think most of you would know about these, especially my colleagues working in the UK and Ireland and across Europe, but certainly for those who are working across the world, some of these might be relevant to you as well in your own environments, wherever you are working. So number one was problems encountered in the workplace. So 64 responses out of the 258 we had, they were around problems in the workplace. And I will elaborate that a bit further. But if you look down further the graph, communication skills comes up as second. And Dr. Grover just highlighted how important communications is. And communication doesn't mean that you are not speaking well enough, or there was no clarity or comprehension. It's also about how your eye contact, body language, perceptions of how you might be coming across as a communicator and being misperceived by the patient or by your fellow colleagues or staff. So communication skills do come up as a close second. But then moving down, career guidance as you work to your first job, support at the workplace, yes. Impact of a culture where you are new, both in the workplace and in the society. So many of us make this first journey coming into the United Kingdom, Europe, or Ireland, for example, and it's entirely, utterly new for you. Some of us come alone, leaving our families behind, and some of us bring our young families with us, and those do make a massive impact. Then limited understanding of the clinical working of the environment of the NHS. Yes, we all learn very quickly whilst on the job, but when we walk into that job, sometimes, occasionally, we are not as well versed with the environment of the department we're going to work in, or the specialty itself. From wherever we come from, we have our skill sets, we have our knowledge and professional behaviors, but then we have to demonstrate them in a slightly alien, new environment, and that also impacts on how people perform and how they might run into difficulties. The demands of societal and social change. Now that's a big one, and although it's an outside influence, but you do bring it into work. So when you move to a different country, you obviously are on your own many times, and some of you are very young when they come to this country on their own. So you have to manage not just your job, but also your finances, accommodation, traveling, acquire a driving license, for example, opening a bank account. Now those are outside stresses which do impact on you. And then sometimes people do bring them into the workplace because they're worried about what might happen after 5 o'clock, what other responsibilities they might have. They have to look after a young family, for example. Equality, diversity, and inclusion at work. And sometimes there are perceptions of being bullied at work, or there might be overt or explicit racism, or you might misperceive it. A comment might be picked up as being bullying or otherwise. And then obviously it will affect everybody or anybody. And how do you deal with it? And how does it affect you in terms of working in the clinical environment you are exposed to? And then, yeah, there are differences in guidelines. There are differences how we manage patients, or how you manage them in your own specialty, both here and abroad. But again, that is something which I have seen many of our colleagues, myself as well, that we pick them up very quickly, and you have the right sources in the UK, the national guidelines, for example, and you follow them. But the thing is, if you look at this graph now, you can see these are the top 9 primary themes which we generated from this Google survey, with problems encountered in the workplace as being the number 1, followed by a close second by the communication skills. So just to pick on a couple of those, really, I didn't want to go into great details because I wanted to leave some time for discussion and questions and answers afterwards. But what you can see that the problems encountered at the workplace, when you explored it further, many of my colleagues picked up the fact that low confidence levels to begin with, maybe lack of assertiveness at the workplace, the ability to say, no, I can't do this. It is something which I cannot do. I am limited by my skills or knowledge. So the ability to say no is sometimes a problem. Maybe being unfamiliar with new systems and learning on the job itself. Hesitation to escalate, asking for help. Again, many of us have been through this loop where we are alone, on our own, thinking I can do this, but not asking for the help at the right time. The fear of making mistakes in litigation. Again, as I said, our previous speakers talked in detail about this. And again, it's quite important that you work within your own limitations, expectations, as that was also mentioned previously. and then make sure that if you are covered, you have indemnity, for example, or cover, so that if something goes wrong, which it will, and then when you start to work, you will make a mistake. We all make mistakes, but how do we deal with them is quite important. So again, going back to the top 10 reasons which our colleagues, both junior and senior, have picked up, you can see that the problems encountered in the workplace, communication skills, not just how you speak English or how you have learned it. When you come to the UK, you will learn that, or you will see how when we talk English, we're talking English, but many of us coming from abroad talk in an American or a Canadian way. That's how we are brought up. But here, British English are slightly different. And also you have to manage accents. People come from all parts of the UK, they have different accents, and this is something you will learn while you're working. The impact of the new culture, as I said earlier, it is there. You cannot deny it. You come to a new place, no matter how much you've heard about it, you may have family or close family in the UK already, but suddenly you have to work on your own. And sometimes you're working alone and living alone, managing finances, for example. What I would also like to say is the impact of the societal change and the social change. Leaving a family behind, it can be traumatic. You can feel homesick, for example. So how do you manage those? Is something which is left to individuals really. But again, as Dr. Groh was saying, you find colleagues, you find friends, you find people you can talk to. You sort of go into that social culture where you have people you can rely upon and discuss things, and that does help. Another point I would like to just emphasize is about how sometimes skills, knowledge, and professional behaviors do make an impact, and they sometimes do impact in a way where people run into difficulties in the clinical environment. And certainly, professional behaviors would be one of my top ones. How are you working with your patients, your colleagues, both senior and junior as well, and also allied healthcare personnel, not just your medical colleagues, but also nurses, advanced healthcare practitioners, physician associates, for example. We may have some limited IT skills coming into the UK, so you have to learn to manage systems, manage learning systems, operating systems, reading guidelines of the screens, for example, and computer-based systems in the UK. And that is something you have to learn sometimes. You do get induction, but however, on a day-to-day basis, these are the things you have to learn very quickly and be pretty good at in a short period of time. But when I say limitation of practical skills and clinical knowledge, it's not about actually a limitation in your individual knowledge, it's about exposure. So when you come from abroad, you have a different type of exposure. You have the required skill set and knowledge. It's just when you come to the UK, you might have to work in different clinical environments. The expectations are different. The clinical knowledge which needs to be there is different, as well as the practical procedures. Just an example, if you're going to work as a foundation doctor year one, you can surely be doing a lot more vent flows, venipunctures, taking blood samples, arterial blood gases. Are you good enough to do those? Are you good on a regular basis? Have you had enough practice in terms of wherever you are coming from? And can you do them with difficult patients or in difficult conditions? So that's where sometimes the limitation can be. The second component or second part of the talk was about how do you survive in your first job in the NHS. And really, the word surviving for me was a bit too strong. So if you can see, I've written the word thriving in brackets. It's about how do you do the best in your first job. Excuse me. And as I said earlier, it is literally about preparation. So when I was given this topic by Mansoor and Naseem earlier, I just started to think, how do I prepare for it? So the moment you start to prepare, you will meet success. And failing to prepare is literally is preparing to fail. And what you should do really is to make sure that you have adequate preparations. And I trust me that the moment you are prepared, you will achieve success. But what you need to have is to always have some set goals before any project or any job. So what are your immediate goals is quite important. Now, in the next minute, I would like you to think about your top 3 goals that you would like to set and achieve in your first job in the National Health Service. Now, you can write this down on a piece of paper in front of you, or you can type it in your phone in the notes app, or you can write it in the chat box. And what we used to do was to, all right, so when somebody told me how this works, is to look at those goals after 6 weeks or after 6 months, and then see where are we? Have I achieved my top 3 goals yet? Or do I need to work harder to achieve those? If I haven't achieved those, why not? So I'll give you 30 seconds to just think about those. You can write them in the chat box. It'll be interesting to see what your top 3 goals might be, because they might be different to what mine have been in the past. Okay. So again, when we looked at the data which came back to us from our friends and colleagues, these were the top tips in terms of thriving in your first job. So when you are at the interview and if the job is offered to you, ask about things about mentorship and the opportunity to shadow in the job, maybe an observership for this job, because then you become familiar with the systems, you become acclimatized to the surroundings, and also you learn how the systems work. When you get the job, ask about provision for what peer support structures is available. How will you get orientated? Does the hospital or the trust provide you with orientation? What about supervision and mentoring? Who's going to be your immediate supervisor and who's going to mentor you through your job? Attend courses. The value of attending these courses, some of them are online, many of them are free, they're provided by trust. Some of them might incur a cost as well, but do keep an eye out. Ask your seniors what courses they did, which they were helping them in their first job in the UK. So things around ethics, governance, audit, quality improvement, for example, communication skills are important. So if you get the opportunity, do those courses. Observe and learn. So soft skills and local cultural norms are very, very important. As I said earlier, we speak English differently when we're abroad. Here you come to the UK, there are accents, there are proverbs, there are many other ways we talk here which may not make sense to you when you come to the UK for the first time, because they're very, they're based in the English language culture of Britain. But you learn those things both inside and outside the workplace. Join organizations which can help you, like the British Medical Association, our organization, or BAPU, the Indian Doctors Organization. They have fantastic work being done by these organizations, and they're helping international medical graduates across the board, not just from one country or from one particular area, really. Join your overseas alumni associations based in the UK or Europe, and be part of their social network, and it helps you. One, you find senior colleagues who are willing to help, and secondly, you will find your friends who might be here from the same alumni, and it's important to have that social network as well. Get indemnity cover. Whatever your research about indemnity cover providers is there, but you do make sure that you're fully insured when you're working in the NHS trust in the United Kingdom. Work-life balance, or as I call it, life and work balance, is extremely important. There are so many secondary points there that all I did was to just write life and work balance in that box, but I am sure you understand how important it is. You have to be fit yourself to look after your patients. You have to be fit both mentally and physically, and be happy in what you're doing to make sure that you do a fantastic job when you come to the UK and carry on doing that job. So look after yourself. You will have responsibilities, might be individual for your own, or they might be looking after a young family. As I said, you might have parents back in from wherever you come from, and look after them and provide assistance to your family, both here and abroad. So those are pressures which will always be there, but you take those pressures and you take them alongside with the work you do. Now you have signed up to work in the UK in a new system which has its own norms and expectations. So learn the system, learn how to adapt is quite important. If you have any questions, there is no shame in asking, I do not know what's happening here. Ask the question, ask for help, but above all, know your limitations. You have the skills to
Amir,
figure
1
out.
minute.
Thank you. You have the skills to figure out, and you clearly can articulate your own needs. You are highly educated. You've done the exams, you passed your exams, and now you're coming to this country. Trust your training and be confident. So my take-home messages are: top is to be honest to the job, to yourself, be on time, leave on time, be honest to the system. Believe in yourself. And I kid you not, you are worth it. You've done the hard work. You passed your exams. Respect your colleagues, whether it's the nurses or anybody else, especially the nurses. They know the system better than you. They know more about the patients as well. Ask for help. Learn about common presentations, both acute and chronic within your own specialty. We are all colleagues. There's no hierarchy here. We respect the person, not the rank. You respect everybody across the board, and we work as colleagues. Just a few acknowledgements to Global Medical Education for the opportunity, Professor Dr. Naseem Naqvi and Mansoor Ali for the opportunity once again, Mohsen Zaman, my dear friend, who also helped me with the global survey, the Google Forms, and all those friends who took part in the survey. So thank you very much. There's my email. If you want to get in touch, please do so. Thank you again.
Thank you very much, Dr. Burney. Excellent presentation. Mansoor, I think we should take some questions.
Yeah, no, I think just you know, you left us speechless, Dr. Burney and Dr. Grover. I think amazing, excellent presentations. We've got some really good sort of thank yous. If you can just go through the chat box later. But yes, I think we should start with the questions.
Yeah.
I'll start with a question first to Dr. Grover. Joydeep, I've got a question from Srinivas Jakula. How should a genuine whistleblower who is raised rather serious patient safety concerns handle vindictive, retaliatory, and obviously false complaints raised by those involved in the concerns of the whistleblower that the whistleblower has raised? Please give specific and clear advice in the context of GMC's obvious collusion with corrupt trust establishments and a useful and ineffective PIDA 1998 law. Sorry, it's a very long-winded question. This is why I asked you to read the question first.
No, I have read the question. Thank you.
Thank you.
I've read all the questions, so I can take them up one by one. But before I do that, you know, I think I would like to really appreciate Dr. Burney's absolutely fantastic presentation. There's so many fantastic points there from someone who's done this. I think anyone coming to the UK should look at those, at least the last two slides, and try to understand why those two slides are there, because these are really crucial. So thank you. Amazing presentation, Dr. Burney. Srinivas, your question is so detailed and so specific. I think it is probably not the right forum to answer it. It's a very complicated, very legal question. And you know, you can email me directly and I'll answer it for you, because it is so specific. I don't think this is the right forum for it. So you have my email, Srinivas. You can write to me about that. I have the next question, which is from...
There is one, Joydeep, from Shiva Raman.
Yeah, so if
can I politely refuse to treat or operate a patient who complained against me in the past?
Yes, you can. But in the context of whether the treatment can be safely provided by someone else, and whether it's an emergency or not. So even in times where you think the patient is going to complain, however, the patient is in dire need of medical emergency, you must address the patient's medical needs first, okay? The only reasons why you may not be able to do that if the patient lacks capacity or is actually being very, very abusive. And I'm not saying physically, but even verbally. However, in most let us say semi-planned or planned encounters, you are within your rights to say, I don't think we have a good patient-doctor relationship here. The patient has previously complained against me. It's probably better if someone else treats them. So I think in most circumstances you can do that. But if the patient requires emergency urgent surgery or treatment, then you should provide for the patient's needs wherever possible in sensible circumstances. So a qualified yes, in most circumstances, yes, but not always. And if you know, these are based on the context. If you're stuck there, then speak to the defense organization who will provide you the right advice. I hope that is useful. Then I've got Suchitra's question, which is actually quite interesting. Suchitra Vijay Narasimhan. So she's asking if the government is now supporting GPs. So not MDU or MDS or MPS, how do we respond? So, well, let me just go there a little bit. So the government or yourself or the public or whichever way you want to put it is basically providing what is called indemnity, which means that they will pay the patients in case something goes wrong. Okay. And that's the extent of that. So they will make the payout if there's a negligence claim against you. They will not support you in answering complaints. They will not represent you in front of GMC. They will not help you through any local trust procedures or your CCG procedures at all. So as far as the payment to the patient is concerned, you don't need to worry about that. But everything else, you must take membership of a defense organization, because if you need to answer a complaint to protect your name, if you need to go through your employment procedures because of a complaint, which could be hospital or GP based, or if you are referred to the GMC by the patient or by someone else, that scheme does not cover you. It only pays the patient out and take care of legal costs. And this is also the same for hospital doctors. It's been the same for hospital doctors all throughout. So whenever we say indemnity providers, actually indemnity for hospital patients is also provided by the government, but that indemnity is specifically called medical malpractice indemnity, which is basically just paying the legal costs and payouts to the patient. Everything else has never been covered, and for that you have to have a defense organization, which is what Dr. Burney said, that have your indemnity. Actually, it is called professional defense. MDS is unique because we will provide you cover both for your employment and other defense, which makes much more sense, but we can talk about that at some other time. I've got a question from Dr. Himadri. Can you provide guidance on handling complaints from colleagues or staff and the organization against their employees? Now, Himadri, that is a very, very interesting question. And actually, this is outside of the usual defense organization type of work, because complaints from your colleagues or complaints from your employer tend to fall into employment disputes, or sometimes into grievance and bullying and harassment type of dispute. And therefore, what you need is an organization which can provide you with the right mentorship, guidance, and the understanding of how the MHPS law is structured, so that you can get right advice on those type of things. So again, we are very happy to provide independent advice as accordingly. And I think, yes, and Mansoor asked the same question from Himadri, so that's fine. Is there any other question for me particularly?
Yeah, so I can actually just ask, I think it's very interesting, and I hope Joydeep will be able to answer this question. From Aziz Ahmed saying, if patient has complained against a doctor, then there's a breakdown of doctor-patient relationship, and it should be a valid reason to refer the patient to an appropriate colleague. How do you think, and what do you say about this? I mean, just if someone's complained, could we easily say this patient should be to another colleague? I have got some other views, but I'm sure I'll listen to what you have to say.
Okay, so this is about an anonymous feedback, which then raises a complaint against you. Okay, so it's tricky. I think when you get a 360 feedback from, not from your colleagues, but this one, I think, this is from...
Is it Aziz Ahmed, the last one? Aziz Ahmed on the Q&A.
Okay, I mean, there's another one which says anonymous patient feedback.
Yeah, there is another one from Venkatesh. He's asking if a patient makes adverse remarks about doctor while completing the 360 assessment, should it be treated as a complaint?
Okay, so let me answer that first, and then we'll come to this one, Mansoor. So, and I think you can't really treat it as a complaint because it's anonymous, and therefore you can't investigate it. You see, if there is a concern raised in a patient feedback, I think you have to mention it, that feedback has come, but you have to treat it and discuss with your appraiser and see what you've learned from that feedback. But you can't really take it forward as a complaint, because there is no way that anyone can address that. So I think that has to be done between you and your appraiser, and perhaps you might, the doctor might have something to learn from that particular thing. It may be that it's just one unhappy patient amongst hundreds of feedback that you've got, so it may not be that relevant anyway. The other one, Mansoor, was, if you point that out to me.
Yeah, if this was Aziz Ahmed, actually.
Yes, okay, I got that. If a patient has complained against a doctor, then there is a breakdown of doctor-patient relationship, and this should be a valid reason to refer the patient to an appropriate colleague. Yes and no. So sometimes, actually, a patient will complain, and you will respond to it. And that sometimes leads to a very constructive discussion, which might actually build and rebuild your relationship, and the patient then is happy with what you've done. So you may not need to automatically say you need to go to someone else. There will be certain, and I think I would say 50% of the time, where the patient will complain and you will say, well, actually, this is a complete breakdown because, I'm giving you particular advice, which is based on my professional opinion. The patient is unwilling to accept that advice. Therefore, there's a breakdown. The patient has complained because they're unhappy with my professional opinion, and I've tried to explain it to them. They don't want it, so they want a second opinion. I think in those circumstances, it's a different question altogether. So it is not necessarily that you have to always say that I'm not taking care of you, but in I think 50% of the time you will say that actually, listen, there's no point going further. And this frequently happens in pediatrics and psychiatry, and even in general medicine, for example. You've given an opinion, the patient wants X, you see expectation is there, you're only able to deliver Y. And if there is no way that you can match each other, then the patient's not happy, and then you can't make them happy because there's a limit of what medicine can do. In those circumstances, you can say, well, take a second opinion and take it from there.
Yeah, thank you. I think there's a question for Dr. Burney. There are two questions actually, so I've combined them from Frugata and Sadman. So they're asking that in the COVID era, shadowing and inductions have been few and far between. So how should new IMGs handle this situation, and can we ask for an online induction? I mean, is online induction happening more these days?
Well, yes, COVID has obviously impacted on many things, and obviously that's also impacted on how IMGs come and work in this country. Clinical placements became far and few in between, but hopefully now with the tide turning, we might go back to some sort of normalcy in the coming months or year. So all I would say that you always ask that question of the trust you apply to. Ask the people what sort of inductions they're offering. Are they offering type of induction which suits you? Same with clinical placements, shadowing and observership. So individual trusts might have individual policies laid out for their IMGs who they take on for their specialty training or jobs.
Thank you. Anila Ambreen is asking how IMGs can deal with difficult and undermining educational supervisors giving negative feedback on e-portfolios.
All right, now that's a tricky one, really, isn't it? I think it's one. To be honest, it is rare. It doesn't happen on a regular basis. Again, it could be misperceptions. You might find somebody who's very committed to work as a supervisor, and you might feel that they are putting you in pressure, or that you're under pressure because of your supervisor. And it might. And again, on the flip side, relationships can break. Any relationship can be affected, professional or non-professionals. The key to any problem like that is to have a conversation. Always sit down and have an honest conversation about what you feel is happening. And the second thing you should do as an IMG or even as a graduate here is to support your work with evidence. I think Dr. Grover mentioned document everything. I think you should document your portfolios fully, completely. If the body of evidence is there, then it becomes very difficult for somebody to say you haven't done something when it's clearly documented. So I would suggest that make sure your portfolios are fully documented, they're up to speed, and they're evidenced by people like the registrars or specialty training registrars, nurses, and you can do those things. So then there is little scope for the person who's deliberately trying to. I'm being very careful here. Nobody does it deliberately, but if it is the case, then hopefully you have something to stand your ground on.
Dr. Burney, I've got a question actually, not from the answer. I remember when I started in the NHS 2003-4, we used to actually have an NHS induction for IMGs, international medical graduates. Most of the trusts or Dean used to kind of actually conduct that. Is it happening anywhere, do you think, across the country? Is it happening in Sheffield where you are? I mean, this will be such a good platform for IMGs actually know and be induced by people who work for the NHS. I remember I underwent that. It was a weekend getaway, and it was such an amazing platform.
I have to be honest, I do not know if it happens in Sheffield. I can ask the question and come back to you, and also reply to anybody who wants to drop me an email. But again, as I said, inductions across trusts, and correct me if I'm wrong here, all three of you are here, they are quite individualistic to different trusts at times. They tailor to their own trusts at times. But there are some generic as well as some specialized parts of the induction. I will try and find out an answer to that question if there is an induction done for IMG separately or separate to regular inductions.
Excellent. Joydeep, have you got any particular question you want to answer? Because
Mansoor, there is a question. There are two questions actually.
yeah, I know there's lots for Joydeep, so I just want to know whether he's itching to answer any particular question.
I was going through questions, two questions, and then we'll conclude the session.
Okay.
Joydeep, there's a question from an anonymous attendee. There's no name. I have commented about high BMI and alcohol intake, the need to discontinue or cut down, etc. Patient complained to PALS. Do I need to apologize?
Okay, so I noticed both those complaints actually. I think the first one was that, can I sue a patient? So yes, you can, but you shouldn't really. Just, it's a professional hazard. Being in a profession, you don't sue your clients actually. So yeah, it's sometimes you're frustrated and you want to do it, but I would just say, just let it be. It's not worth it. Secondly, I think this is an interesting question, is do you have to apologize? So listen, you don't have to always apologize and say, I'm sorry, I'm wrong. Apology does not mean I'm wrong. Apology can just barely mean that, listen, I'm sorry that you felt that way. This is what we did for your own good. This is what our professional advice is. This is what we thought it is right. If it's hurt you in any way, if it has made you feel bad, then I'm sorry that it made you feel bad. It does not mean that you are, prostrating yourself and saying something that you don't believe in. You can always say, I am sorry that you felt bad. That acknowledges that they felt bad, and you're sorry that they felt bad. And next time around, it's about those managing expectations part of it. So you've referred someone to the alcoholics clinic or obesity clinic. They obviously don't think they're alcoholic or obese. And although it is for their benefit, the expectation that they had was someone is going to tell me that I can keep drinking, I can keep eating sweets, and I can be fat and I'm fine because I don't want to address it. So I think it's about expectations. So don't force anyone to do things that they don't want. I think that's where it's coming from. So I think that's there. Now, there is another one. I was recently named in a complaints with 5 other ICU colleagues. Very generic and mainly around communication. What should we do? Well, actually, there are some patients, and I'm not saying all, who just have a bee in their bonnet. You just need to acknowledge their concerns. I'm sorry you felt bad. We did what we could do, and this is what it is. And if it is a generic complaint against many people, I would strongly suggest that you leave it to your defense organization and to your PALS team to address those questions. They are very good people. They get paid for all of this stuff. They can write nice blurby stuff, make them people happy and settle some feelings. Some patients are unreasonable. We can't get away from it. And I think sometimes you just have to let it go.
Yeah. There's a question for Dr. Burney. What is this is an excellent question actually. Are there any research or studies done on what is the public perception of the IMGs working in the NHS? Any study done? Is there an attitude of appreciation? Is there
this is my question.
Is it your question, Mansoor?
This is my question, yes.
Okay. It's a great comment, isn't it? It's a great comment and question. All 4 of us are here, and we represent the international medical community. You came and worked. I went from the UK, studied, came back, and you guys obviously made it from wherever you came from, Pakistan, India, or other countries. And I do believe there's a great sense of appreciation of what we do, both at the public level, governmental level. The massive contribution the overseas medics and healthcare professionals make to the NHS. And what we're talking about, where difficulties happen, are a minority. But it's just bad news makes news, if you see what I mean. The number of patients you guys treat every day, they walk away with their health in hand, and they do say thank you and move on. But yes, the case which does not make well enough a recovery, or they have complications, are the ones which stay with us, and they also make a bit of news. So I think it's really, I think there's a lot of appreciation out there. I'll be very honest with you. Whether there's a study out there looking at how it's been appreciated, that is something we can do a search on. But organizational work like BAPU, APPNE, others, Apps UK, many others, you can see how we are contributing, and it's being appreciated by many people across the UK and Ireland.
Yeah, interestingly, in the US, there are studies like this. And in the US, actually, doctors from the subcontinent always ranked higher than the local doctors. So it's different actually. In the US, there are studies which say that people prefer. In the UK, there are no studies as such, but it's a different perspective. I think there are lots of good things. There some people are not so pleasant. There are different. Let's not go into a huge discussion about it. But overall, I think as time has gone in the last 10, 20 years that we've been here, we've noticed a lot of change and appreciation, and people actually are much more relaxed about getting treated by anyone. So it's a sign of a very progressive work. There's lots more to be done, but things have definitely improved.
We have time for one. Thank you, Joydeep. Just one last question to Joydeep from Yara Shaheen. Regarding indemnity, I am on rotational post in medicine, trust grade. Whenever I apply, they ask for a specialty, but I change every 4 months. So how should I pick just one specialty when acute medicine indemnity costs more and so on?
Well, I can only answer from the perspective of medical defense shields, MDSUK. So from our perspective, it doesn't matter if you're a trainee or a non-trainee. We have a set grade for you depending on which level you're working. So you can be ST1 or 2, or you can be ST3 plus, and then whether you're a trainee or a non-trainee. So for us, it doesn't really matter which specialty you do in junior doctor posts. Other organizations might have more complicated formulae, but actually, just come to us. I think we are very good.
Thank you. Mansoor, do you want to conclude the session?
Yeah, thank you very much. I think this has been one of the highest rated sort of session and most numbers of registrants that we've actually ever had. We started, me and Naseem started in 2017, actually, which was only 5-6 people. And now look at that, we've got 500 registrants. Obviously, we've had almost 150, 160 people who actually were there with the session. It's all recorded, so please do let people know that they can actually review this at a later end. Thank you very much, Dr. Grover. Thank you very much, Dr. Burney. Thanks, Naseem, for chairing the session. And we'll be back on the 27th of February with 2 excellent presentations, one from US, a pediatrician talking about pediatric emergencies, and one from our very own Sadr Fatma Jaffer Boy will be talking about some breast-related complications and surgeries. So thank you very much. I conclude the session. Thank you, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Everyone. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.